Hello, happy Monday. Today we're going to talk about a couple of sonnets from William Shakespeare. 17 and 130 by Shakespeare. And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because Sir Patrick Stewart is currently reading daily one sonnet all the way through, and he's currently on 32. So if you go to his Twitter page, you can watch him read and then work through these sonnets. Several times he'll stop or he'll think about the way he's paced something or pronounced something. It's very, very interesting. So I encourage you to head over there. Just some quick background in case you haven't thought about the sonnets of Shakespeare in a while. There are 154 with two main addressees. Sonnets 1 to 17 are all written for a fair youth, and Shakespeare is really obsessed that he have a baby. And then the other major addressee is the dark mistress. So we're going to be looking at one poem from each of these. Sonnet 117. Who will believe my verse in time to come, if it were filled with your most high deserts? Though yet heaven knows it is but as a tomb, which hides your life and shows not half your parts. If I could write the beauty of your eyes, and in fresh numbers number all your graces, the age to come would say, this poet lies. Such heavenly touches ne'er touched earthly faces. So should my papers, yellowed with their age, be scorned like old men of less truth than tongue, and your true rights be termed a poet's rage, and stretched meter of an antique song. But were some child of yours alive that time, you should live twice in it and in my rhyme. So essentially what this poem does is it looks at the relationship between the poet's own writing, giving immortality, and progeny of this addressee being a form of immortality. In doing so, however, Shakespeare gives us a number of things that we've come to be very familiar with over the course of this last year. One of the most exciting things in this poem is Shakespeare's strong sense of the time period at which he's writing and that there will be readers to come after him. So for instance, we have in time to come, and then later on, the age to come, and he calls his own work antique song, and then that time. So there's all of these elements of awareness of the future. What Shakespeare's saying in the first quatrain is that the people that read his work will not believe that the addressee is as beautiful as he is. Who will believe my verse if it's filled with your most high deserts? So there we have this theme of the truth inside of a verse. And then, though yet heaven knows it is but as a tomb. With tomb, we have the idea of the literary monument, as well as a possible pun on tome, like a literary tome, a volume, a book, which hides your life and shows not half your parts. Then he starts the second quatrain. If, right, a possibility, if I could write the beauty of your eyes, and in fresh numbers number all your graces. So this is the idea, I think, of meter being numbered and rhythmical. So if I could write fresh poetry, that is a kind of poetry that has not been written before, then the result is disbelief. This poet lies, says the future critics. And then here's what they say. Such heavenly touches never touched earthly faces. Well, Shakespeare's having none of this. And so in the third quatrain, so should my papers yellowed with their age, right? The works get older, be scorned like old men of less truth than tongue. So this is the critics right? They just go jabber, 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 complain, complain to complain. That's the tongue, but they're not speaking any truth. And your true rights might be termed a poet's rage. The rage of a poet is often this sense of madness that comes from divine inspiration. And then Shakespeare gives us a joke which underscores the idea of the rhythm of the poem, right? And stretched meter of an antique song. Well, in order to make this fit the meter, you have to say, and stretched meter of an antique song. You have to actually stretch the word in order to meet the meter. And that's what Shakespeare's kind of saying. Hey, in the future, you might not be writing all of this rhythmic poetry with iambic pentameter. And you're going to look at my words and mock me for it. But were some child of yours alive that time, right? In the time in the future, and you can trace the genealogy, then you would live twice in it, in the child, and in my rhyme. So the last thing the poet ends with is the way that he's going to help immortalize this person whose name, of course, he does not use. So there's always a level of anonymity and fun. Just to connect this quickly with some things from our course, the idea of the immortality of poetry. So we saw this is Ozymandias. Tell that its sculptor well these passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things. The words of the poet and the sculptor, the artist, survive when the person themselves don't. Gilgamesh, he had carved his trial on stone tablets. Aeneid, book 6, the importance of the poets that we saw there. And then the last lines of the wasteland, these fragments I have shored against my ruins. The next sonnet that we're going to look at is quite different. Sonnet 130. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why, then her breasts are done. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a mistress go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. This poem very, very powerfully gives us what is called the turn, the way in which the last two lines of a Shakespearean sonnet will often shift away from everything that's come before. So the main premise here, right, is Shakespeare saying, hey, all of these people that are writing poems in which they claim that their mistresses are super beautiful and use these similes and comparisons to nature, well, there's something false about that. And so he goes through and very carefully divides it, right? My mistress's eyes, they're not like the sun. Coral is red. Her lips aren't red. Right? It's very clearly divided. Her breasts are now white as snow. Black, this line is a little bit historical. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. If hairs be wires is this idea of calling somebody blonde, and it's the gold wire that would be used in a hair net that you would have. She doesn't have rosy cheeks, right? There's no false comparison here. And then some perfumes, there's more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. This is probably the most powerful of the negative comparisons. And then he starts getting a bit confessional, right? I love to hear her speak, but I admit music is more pleasing. I never saw a goddess walk, but my mistress, she walks on the grounds. And notice this great word, tread. Here I want to make another connection to poetry and specifically this idea of the metapoetic, because the mistress is beating out a sound, right? The way she walks is rhythmical, and Shakespeare's writing this rhythmical, heavily treaded poetry. And then the turn. and yet very, very powerful adversative. By heaven, he swears, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So this is huge. He says, every single person that's ever written a love poem and made this kind of comparison, my love is more rare than that. My love is so absolutely unique that it transcends the millions of other love poems. So that's a pretty cool place to go. The question is, do you agree with how he got there? And this is going to be one of the forum questions that I'll post in a second. So a couple things here. First, there's this great self-own in the beginning. In Sonnet 18, perhaps Shakespeare's most famous sonnet, he said, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And now in this poem, he's like, hey, all those other things that I've written, I was wrong to do it that way. And one of the things I want you guys to think about is this a poem of radical honesty, or is it satirical? Is it obnoxious? Just what's going on? Are there different levels to think about it? So here are the follow-up questions. Do you feel a sense of godhood when you read a book because you are like a necromancer resurrecting a lost voice? Do you see any connections between beauty expectations in Sonnet 130 and modern depictions of beauty, especially in social media and the idea of the Instagram star? Also with this poem, it's like Shakespeare, something of a clout chaser. And then which of these two poems do you find more romantic and why? Maybe you don't find either one romantic. Tell us about that. And then do you find any other connections to the year one seminar texts or other things that you've read at BSEC in these two poems? Whether that's to agree with me about Sonnet 17 or to explore other ideas and themes and connections that you see. All right, very good. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you follow up and watch some of Patrick Stewart's other videos, and we'll see you later this week.